Thank you for coming back. I'm going to try and wrap up Brian Albert with this second video. Let's hope we get it done. Okay, so next, both Brian and his wife, Nicole, claim that when Jen McCabe came in their room that morning at 6 a.m., that she was hysterical. Now, mind you, he testified that he sleeps with his phone in bed with him because they've got 5 kids. And just in case there's ever an emergency, they want to be able to answer the phone right away. Yet there was an emergency. There was one taking place right on their own fucking front yard. And Jen was trying desperately to call both of their phones, and neither of them answered. So their whole little emergency hotline situation is incredibly flawed. Anyway, so they say that she comes in and she's hysterical. Now, all evidence to the contrary. When Jen McCabe was making the 911 call, and we've all heard the 911 call, she is very calm. She knows the address. She's like, there's a man on the lawn, blah, blah, blah. She's very clear, very concise, very calm. There's a point where she's even whispering a little bit to the 911 operator, trying to kind of convey to them that it might already be too late. But she doesn't want to say that in front of Karen and Carrie, who are busy performing CPR and panicking that the person that they love could be dying. And so she's like, I think you need to get here right away. So she's clearly in a pretty sound state to be able to have that conversation with 911. Plus, all of the dash cam from that morning show Karen running around like a Tasmanian devil and show Jen being perfectly calm. Yet according to the Alberts, when she came in, she was hysterical. Now, even though she'd been out on the lawn as a witness, she was allowed to go in the house and stay in the house with Brian and Nicole. Her husband was allowed to come over. Julie Albert was allowed to come over. They were all allowed to stay in that home for more than an hour before any police officers went in there to talk to them. The first one, of course, was Lank and Good. They went in the home. They didn't look around. They said they had no need to. They sat the entire family at the dining room table, and they took group statements together. Now, for starters, this is completely flawed because Brian Albert is a cop, and Brian Albert knows you don't do witness statements in a big group kumbaya. You separate everybody, you bring them all into the station, you record every fucking word, and you do it right. But of course, he's like, no problem, officer, come on in. We'll just all chat with you here. Keep in mind, they called Lank back about an hour or two later because Jen had some things that she forgot to tell him the first time around. Their sworn statements change over the course of the morning. Now, by the time that Proctor and Buchanan become involved, they need to start going around and interviewing people, and they need to go over to Jen McCabe's house to interview her. And who do they find there but Brian Albert? So Brian Albert swears that he went over to Jen's house because Jen had been distraught. And he was really concerned, and he went to comfort her. Such a big, lovey teddy bear. He let a guy die on his fucking yard, but oh no, he's got to go hug Miss Jen because she's upset. You and I both know the truth. He went over to keep her fucking contained because Brian Albert and Proctor, even though their families are close and there's like many connections between the two families, Brian Albert and Michael Proctor don't really know each other. I don't even think they've met before. So he wants Proctor to interview him and his wife at McCabe's house because he doesn't want Proctor to come back to his house. See, Lank's a friendly. If he said to Lank, nothing to see here, Lank would go, okay, and Lank would walk out the door. But he doesn't know yet that Proctor's a complete fucking coward. He doesn't know that yet. He doesn't know that Proctor's completely on the take and is completely void of any capability to actually investigate this the real way. Brian doesn't trust that yet. So he goes over to the McCabes and they all do their interviews. Again, Brian is present for everyone else's interviews so conveniently. Now, the reason part of this is important is because I think we all realize that if there is a ringleader, if there is a godfather, it is Brian Albert. So much so that Brian Higgins even testified to the federal grand jury that even Chief Berkowitz was a little bit afraid of Brian Albert. In fact, Brian Albert is so concerned about keeping a lid on this entire thing and making sure that everybody plays their role correctly. Yannetti spoke at the pretrial about a situation where Kevin Albert was probably made to call Brian Higgins and basically spoke on his brother's behalf. He told Brian Higgins, hey, listen, you kind of went off grid. Brian's really concerned. I understand you haven't checked in with him in a while, especially since these subpoenas have gone out. And Kevin makes it clear to Brian Higgins, everyone got a subpoena but you. So he's kind of making it seem like, we know, dude, get back in here or else. So I think that Higgins and Jen McCabe, even Chief Berkowitz, like everybody that's embroiled in this, I think they're all afraid of Brian Albert. And so they're all, that's the reason no one's turned. That's the reason no one's gone legit. That's the reason nobody has, gone to the feds, is because they're all scared to death of Brian Albert. He controls the entire thing. Now, let me talk quickly about the phone he disposed of. So he did go ahead and replace his phone. Now, the trick is that he did it the day before there was a motion. A judge ordered him to preserve his phone with all the data that's associated with. So he was put on notice of pending litigation, and that required that he produce any cell phone that he used between January 28th of 2022 and February 28th of 2022. There was going to be a hearing that was scheduled, and I'm reading this directly as Alan Jackson said it in the testimony, that he must not alter, delete, destroy, or in any way manipulate any of the electronic data associated with the cell phone. He took that to mean that it was okay for him to trade it in. So he went and got a new phone one day prior to the order from the judge ordering him to preserve it. Now, what had happened was interesting, is in a conference call with Lally told him, hey, there's about to be a preservation order on your phone. And he was like, great, okay, no problem. He didn't bother to tell Lally in that phone call that he'd already gotten rid of the phone. Like, wouldn't you do that if someone called you and said, oh, I'm going to come get my sweater back? And you're like, oops, I gave it to Goodwill. Like, wouldn't you say something to somebody if you no longer had the thing that they were talking about? But when he's asked about this on the stand, he just goes, well, Lally never asked. So Lally didn't say, do you still have the phone, Brian? But Lally didn't ask. And what's interesting about this is this wasn't the first time the preservation order came up. It had already come up once before and been denied. There was already a Rule 17 motion that had been denied. He knew that there was a constant fight happening, which is why he had an attorney helping fight those subpoenas. He knew there was constant motion to try to get his phone, and he traded it in anyway. Now, when you update your phone, a lot of the stuff is transferred. So like your contacts, your photos, your music, like that kind of stuff is transferred. But what gets lost are things like geolocation data, iMessages, any Google searches, and any file access history. All of that gets wiped out when you switch to a new phone. Now, Brian Albert claimed that he didn't know that you lose that stuff when you get a new phone. Considering he's part of the Boston Police Department fugitive unit, you would think him having a basic knowledge of how cell phone data works would be a job requirement. Now, I think Brian Albert started out doing the best he could to circumvent the investigation, but he hit pay dirt when Proctor got involved. And even though he didn't really know Brian Albert at all, he knew all of the family, and he wanted to do everything he could to protect or curry favor with this family. So Proctor bent over backwards to cover for them through a sloppy investigation. So Brian got to sit back and watch Proctor and now Jen McCabe and everybody else take the hit for all of their stupidity, so he could just sit back and be the guy who looks like he didn't do anything wrong.